So, Elsa, you're working with Queen Elizabeth II, arguably one of our greatest ever female monarchs. Let's look at the hierarchy of how the ladies-in-waiting operated. And then maybe you could talk me through some of your experiences of your time working for the late Queen. So, Mistress of the Robes, who held that title and why is that more important, for example, than a Maid of Honour?
The Mistress of the Robes, in my day, was the Duchess of Grafton, I think. So there were 8 or 10 ladies in waiting. It was interesting what Kate said earlier about the hard work. Actually, the ladies in waiting that I knew all used to vie to go on those overseas visits. There'd always be 2 of them that would accompany the Queen. They would always vie to go and do a domestic visit in the UK. So there was a lot of, there was a rota drawn up, but they all wanted to be on that rota. So there was a bit of almost rivalry, I suppose, amongst the ladies in waiting about who was the one that accompanied the Queen.
It's the same historically as well. They all want to be at the front. They all want the best dancing positions or whatever else. They want to be seen.
Where you sit at table, where your room is, where you sleep. I mean, this means more than anything else.
Yeah.
Right, so...
And they're quite formidable. I mean, if you wanted to find out something, you would ask a lady in waiting and you would treat them with the utmost respect. So you could be the most senior person in the royal household, but no one was more senior than a lady in waiting.
So talk to me about Angela Kelly, for example. Was she the Mistress of the Robes during the latter years of the Queen's life?
She was not. So she was the Queen's personal assistant and the Queen's senior dresser. So she was not a lady in waiting.
Right.
So the Queen met Angela, or Angela met the Queen, should I say, on an official trip to Berlin. And Angela was working for the ambassador there, and that's how that connection was made. And Angela came over and worked as a dresser, as a junior dresser for the Queen, and that relationship just built and built and built.
And a real friendship grew out of that.
Absolutely,
And she was a docker's daughter from Liverpool, working-class girl, that the Queen really came to lean upon.
Yes, absolutely. And during lockdown, Angela was one of the constants in that sort of HMS bubble, as it was called, the person who was there at the Queen's side when her family couldn't be. So there was a real personal connection between the two.
First Lady of the Bedchamber, that title belonged to Lady Susan Hussey.
Who, of course, was Prince William's godmother, married to Marmaduke Hussey, or the widow of Marmaduke Hussey, who was the Director General of the BBC, and again, a very, very close confidant of the Queen's. 60
years she served the Queen.
Absolutely.
60 years. And a great friend as well.
Yes, yes, totally. And someone who the Queen can confide in, can actually be relaxed and know nothing's going to be repeated in the outside world. And they were clearly very, very close.
Now, Elsa, you have actually been asked to work as a lady-in-waiting. Who was that for? Well,
it came out of the blue, to be honest. So the then Earl and Countess of Wessex were on an official visit to the Isle of Man. I was there in my capacity as a press secretary. The private secretary at the time had to go back to London for unforeseen circumstances, so they asked me to be the private secretary and lady-in-waiting. And I'd only been the press secretary for about 2 minutes, so it was a role that I had absolutely no idea what to do. But it was collecting flowers, it was to be on hand, it was to write the thank you letters afterwards. So absolutely fascinating.
Job, because when you get a thank you letter from the lady-in-waiting, goodness me, they've got all this correspondence. Did you also carry the royal handbag?
I did. She carried her own handbag, but I did lend her a pashmina at one occasion when it was cold. So we've swapped clothes.
So you've put in a shift. So congratulations, well done. How do you think this role will evolve? Because we've seen Camilla give the titles a bit of a makeover to something that feels less subservient and more, companions.
Yes, absolutely.
Is the title that she's bestowed upon her sister and her best friend. How do you think that will look under Catherine?
That's a very good question. So the Princess of Wales currently doesn't have any ladies-in-waiting or companions. I think when she becomes Queen, she will possibly rethink that. It's actually quite nice to have, somebody who you've known and trusted to be by your side in those big events, because when you've always got to be on show, and Catherine is the most globally recognised woman probably on the planet. And every mood, everything you do, everything you wear, everything you say is massively over-scrutinised. It must be nice to have some downtime to talk to someone who you can trust and actually say, whether that was an amazing visit or did you speak to that chap or just someone.
I've had a difficult day.
Yeah, or to kick your shoes off and have a cup of tea and actually be yourself rather than being, an actor playing yourself.
Yeah.
I think traditionally we might expect it's perhaps Catherine to maybe appoint her sister Pippa, because Catherine is so famously close to her family. She doesn't have companions because she's so close to her mother and her sister. I think we might possibly expect maybe that Pippa might be someone she might appoint. But then, of course, Pippa has her own life, 3 children, a busy life of her